Sometimes you go to an Amazon page and the first 8 results are ads. You have ads at the top of the page. You have ads on every product page. So advertising, the platform in general is becoming much more pay to play. So if you're not advertising, you're not going to get the visibility. And because of that, you're not going to get the long-term sales.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Eagan Heath. I'm a digital marketing agency owner, and we help our clients with paid search, paid social, and email automation. Today, I have on another digital marketer, another e-commerce guy. We have Mike Begg. He's the CEO of AMZ Advisers. Mike, welcome.
Eagan, thank you for having me here. Excited to be talking with you today.
Yeah, glad to have you. Excited to learn from you. Tell us a bit about your e-commerce journey. How did you get into this?
Yeah, so my journey goes back quite a ways at this point. So out of college, I worked in a variety of different fields. I ended up getting into real estate development, and I was actually working at Sears. So this was back in 2014, 2015. And obviously at that point, retail was starting to go downhill a little bit. Sears was really struggling and e-commerce was starting to pick up. So one of my friends realized that you could sell products online. And from there, we started figuring out how to do it all. So we started buying stuff on clearance from all the local stores and doing some retail arbitrage on Amazon. From there, we figured out how to import products from China and start building brands that way. And we built 2 or 3 brands. And what we realized was that most brands at the time didn't know what they were doing on Amazon. And Amazon was just become a bigger and bigger sales engine. And one of the brands we had was competing against Crayola. And that's really where the big breakthrough came. You know, in the art supply category, Crayola is the 8,000 pound gorilla in the room. And the fact that we were competing against them in their categories was like, oh, these companies don't know what they're doing. So from there, AMZ Advisers was born. Myself and 2 partners started helping a lot of these big brands really starting to scale on the Amazon platform. And we were working with a lot of big brands early on: Burt's Bees, Clorox, Neff Headwear, Rembrandt Whitening, Placards. So yeah, we've been at it for a while. Ever since 2015, we've been growing the agency and still going strong.
Love it. And on the Amazon side, then, are you guys, sounds like you're doing SEO and PPC within Amazon and running ads. Is that right?
Yeah, we do SEO, PPC, a lot of marketing strategy because there's so many different variables that you can control within Amazon. So a lot of times it's about bringing traffic from sources outside of Amazon to the platform. So yeah, we handle a variety of different things, and we're an advanced Amazon advertising partner. So we manage over $20 million a year in advertising.
Wow. Okay. So you guys are seeing a lot there. Can you talk to us about what are the mistakes people are making and what do you see working?
I think the general perception of how brands approach the platform is flawed a lot of times. So we have a lot of brands that come to us that complain like, hey, I don't own the customer data on Amazon, or hey, why should I invest money in Amazon? And the reason why is because Amazon's the biggest discovery platform there is out there. I mean, 70% of all product searches start on the Amazon platform. Your conversion rates on Amazon are 2 to 3 times what you're going to get on your DTC website. All this makes sense in a bigger picture of how can I acquire as many customers as possible. So why should I spend money on Amazon? Well, because people are there, because people are ready to buy, because if you acquire the customers and bring them into your brand's halo, I'll call it, or into your brand circle, then you have the ability to try to market to them in the future on other channels, try to pull them to your website, whatever it may be. And there's a lot of different strategies you can do there. So I think that's the first thing, is that brands approach the platform the wrong way and with the wrong mentality. And they don't want to invest enough money into the advertising to really get the results that they're looking for.
Okay. So it kind of needs to be a minimum amount of spend for it to work, it sounds like.
Unfortunately, I mean, Amazon's becoming as it becomes a more matured advertising platform, they're trying to push ad spend. I mean, it's like anything you see with Meta, with Google ads, anything else. It originally starts cheap and gets more and more expensive and more competitive. At this point, the ad inventory that Amazon's putting on Amazon is massive. I mean, on the platform itself, maybe you've noticed, but sometimes you go to an Amazon page and the first 8 results are ads. You have ads at the top of the page. You have ads on every product page. So advertising, the platform in general is becoming much more pay to play. So if you're not advertising, you're not going to get the visibility. And because of that, you're not going to get the long-term sales.
Yeah. And just many of these big tech companies were used to that, of Meta, same story. Google, same story these days. So that seems to be the way of it. You want that traffic, you want those eyeballs, you got to pay for them now. That that makes sense. And it sounds like there's kind of the PPC component, there's the search piece, but then there's display advertising within it as well, or kind of discovery ads. Is that right?
Yeah, so we do have the ability to do display advertising and with different types of medium as well. So we can do custom creatives, we can do video ads, eventually do just like the typical little product pages that show up on the sides of websites with Amazon. That's one way. There's a whole nother Amazon advertising platform called the DSP where you can do live streaming ads, you can do TV ads, get ad inventory on third-party networks. So there's a lot of different ways to run the advertising on Amazon and a lot of different options on how to get your product out there to your ideal customer.
Yeah. How do you see those other sort of channels performing as opposed to just kind of the search ads?
Well, when we're talking about the search ads, I mean, the conversion rates are incredible on those. When we're talking about like an advertising funnel or a marketing funnel, search ads is like pretty much the bottom of the funnel. Those are the people that have high purchase intent. They're coming to Amazon. They're looking for something. They probably want to buy something. So like those are always going to perform better than more of the top of the funnel and middle of funnel. There's a lot of opportunities for like generating consideration and awareness and even retargeting. I think that's the most powerful thing that you can do on kind of the display side is bring people back. So like, for example, we were looking at customer data yesterday and we noticed that they were getting about, I think it was 3,000 add to carts per week, but only about 1,500 checkouts. And we were like, well, I mean, let's retarget these people. That's a massive opportunity right there. So we're now going to start deploying more ad dollars into retargeting the add to carts that haven't purchased and try to get some more sales through there, close that spread too. So yeah, I mean, from a data standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, there's a lot of different tools, a lot of different ways to really reach customers when they're ready to buy.
I was going to ask you kind of about what's the targeting like on those displays. It sounds like remarketing is a big one. Are there other more top of funnel ones or prospecting audiences that you use for the display ads?
Yep. We also have the ability to do interest groups, demographic targeting, in market targeting. On the DSP side, you can get even a little bit more granular with all of those aspects, including targeting specific products. Obviously, like I said, the ad inventory, there's such a big variety if you want to do off platform. You can tap into specialty third party ad networks for certain niches. So there's a lot of different powerful tools you can do with the Amazon advertising platforms.
Okay. So some of the display is inside Amazon itself. Some of it is, you're saying, outside of Amazon. People could be browsing the web and seeing those ads and then brought to your product page, right?
Yep, exactly. So you have a lot of different control over how you deploy your ad budget.
Okay. Love it. Appreciate it. Anything else I should ask about? I know things are always changing in the Amazon world. What's the latest and greatest? What's the biggest frustrations and what are some of the big breakthroughs right now?
I think, I mean, I don't know. I can only speak to what I see on the Amazon platform. And I don't know if this is a broader trend that's happening around the world, but over the past year in 2023, it was a little bit challenging. I think sales overall were down. Customer purchases weren't buying as much. And when we looked at the high sales periods, typically like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Amazon Prime Day, sales were, they peak on those days. They obviously go up, but they were not as large as previous years. The peaks weren't as large as previous years, or they weren't increasing as a percentage as much as they had previous years. And there was a lot more focus on products or a lot more performance by products that had high discounts. So it seems like consumers in general were looking for deals more than anything, which is problematic in a way because it obviously has an impact on advertising performance. I think that was one thing that was a little bit frustrating over the past year, I would say, and we'll see whether that trend continues or not. And I think in general, a lot of brands are frustrated with the cost of advertising and trying to acquire new customers. So a lot of our focus now is trying to figure out how can we build additional channels that will lower their average cost per customer acquisition overall. And that's more of the stuff outside of Amazon than anything is like, how do we start identifying cheaper traffic sources that are going to help us blend the average cost of customer acquisition?
Right, right. I should also ask, is there kind of a minimum average order value you guys need to see when you take on a client? Is it minimum margins to have a CPA that works? What do you need to see to really make it work these days?
So that's a really good point. And when we have these conversations with clients, we really kind of segment clients into two big buckets. It's like, is it consumable? Is a customer going to come back and buy it again? Does it have like the classic story of the razor blade and the hand razor? Is the customer going to come back and buy more blades in the future? Or are they going to purchase it once and you're never going to hear from them again? Uh, Personally, we prefer working with consumables because it gives us the opportunity to justify a higher customer acquisition. When it comes to products that are one-off, then we really have to focus on profitability, and it's much harder to get sustained success with those because the margins keep getting squeezed with advertising costs. And that's really where the conversations come around, finding cheaper and cheaper traffic sources. So I would say that it's obviously variable on each one, but when we know that there is going to be a longer customer lifetime value, the client is typically more willing to go higher on the acquisition value or the acquisition cost to get that client.
Yeah, it sounds like that lifetime value might be the right one to look at. Average order
Yep,
value, that's something we take into consideration, but that's not the make or break piece. It's more like what is each customer worth?
exactly. That's what we're looking at in the big picture, especially for the consumable products.
All right. Well, Mike, I'd like to learn more about selling in, is it Mexico and Latin America? You're a bit of an expert on this piece, and I know you live in Guadalajara right now. So talk to us about that. How did you get into this part of it? And then what are the considerations if people want to sell south of the US border here?
So it goes back a ways away as part of the story as well. So when we were starting AMZ Advisors, we wanted to make our money last as long as possible. So we were like, hey, we're from Connecticut. It's pretty expensive there. We were like, how can we do this? And we are like, hey, why don't I move to Mexico? So we ended up moving to Playa del Carmen, actually. And I lived there for about 3-4 months as we started growing the company. And at that point, we started seeing a little success after a couple months. We were like, all right, like we can go this route full time. At that point, I had been living and working with my partners like 24/7 for almost like 12 months at that point.
Wow.
And I was
Okay.
like, I need a little bit of a break, guys. Like I'm going to go travel. I ended up coming to Guadalajara, which is where I met my now wife, and I've
Oh,
been here ever since. But my time here in Guadalajara and here in Mexico in general has opened my eyes up to how different e-commerce is in Latin America versus in the US. So, for example, Latin America is very mobile first, and the US is turning more and more towards mobile. But almost all shopping in Latin America is happening on the mobile side. The availability of products or the product selection that consumers have is very limited because a lot of the challenges that brands have bringing the product in to Latin America. And for example, a lot of customers are willing to pay more to get products for the lack of availability, especially here in Mexico. A lot of people will pay or purchase the product through Amazon US and pay the import fees to get it here into Mexico. So those are all kind of problems in a way. And that's really where we started focusing on how can we solve a lot of these problems for brands. And we started building a company, another company that we're working on now called Go Avance out of that. I'd be glad to share some of more details on Latin America. I think that would be helpful.
yeah, that's great. I think you even have a slide deck you said you could pull up. Would love to see some visuals. I know you got some data. I think that might be a good place to start too, to get people interested of why might they consider selling products in Latin America.
Exactly. And I do have some data. This is from 2022. I still don't have the 2023 data because we are only 12 days in at this point.
Yep.
But
Yep.
so when we're talking about this conversation with a lot of brands, we talk about how can we frame this to them. And the first way is to consider a lot of, and since we're dealing with Amazon, we really focus on how does Latin America compare to a lot of the other e-commerce platforms that a lot of brands consider, or a lot of the Amazon marketplaces that other brands consider. Yeah, so 2022 sales in the UK was about 30.1 billion US dollars. In Germany, we're looking at 33.6 billion. Japan, 24.39 billion. And in Latin America, sales are between 140 to 350 billion.
Hmm.
Now, I mean, obviously we're comparing individual countries to an entire region, but when you actually look at the breakdown in sales, and I think I have it on a different slide, about 50% of those total sales is happening in Brazil, and about 20% of that is happening in Mexico. So when we're looking at those numbers on the low range, you're looking at 28 billion in Mexico happening in e-commerce, and that's already getting you in line with a lot of these other marketplaces. And almost all of those sales are happening on two platforms, which is Amazon and Mercado Libre. So by being on two platforms, you can tap into pretty much all of the e-commerce sales happening in Mexico.
Yeah. Can you talk about Mercado Libre? I don't think everyone's going to be familiar with that.
Sure. So Mercado Libre, it's originally, I think, an Argentinian company. They're the largest e-commerce platform in Latin America. It is the largest platform in Brazil by far. And in Mexico, it's about a 50-50 split between Mercado Libre and Amazon. Mercado Libre is also in almost every other country in Latin America. So Latin American consumers are more familiar with going to Mercado Libre to buy products online than they are Amazon. And that's kind of where the opportunity is for a lot of brands. This is also an interesting slide, and another reason why I think it's a great idea to focus on Latin America. This is from, I believe, Goldman Sachs. This is the percent change in total wealth worldwide in 2022. And this number down here, if you can see it, Latin America had an 18.6% increase in wealth. And every other major region, Asia Pacific decreased 2.6, China 1.7, Europe 3.4, North America 4.5. Pretty much every other region around the world is decreasing in household wealth while Latin America is increasing. And I think that itself is a huge data point that shows that there's going to be a lot more consumer activity. Household income is going to be increasing. The demand for goods is going to be increasing in Latin America. And that's why we're really focused on that marketplace or that region specifically.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh yeah, here you go. This answers the question. This is great.
Yeah, so this is the split between countries. I actually need to look at this chart because I think it may be out of date by this point. But as I said, Brazil and Mexico are by far the two biggest marketplaces. And then when you start looking at some of the other ones, they're significantly smaller. We always recommend focusing on Mexico for most brands, or at least most US brands, because of proximity and because it's a lot easier to do business in Mexico compared to Brazil. So Brazil, I think I have it on another slide. Brazil is like 172 out of like 190 in ease of doing business worldwide by country. So it's one of the reasons why we don't recommend Brazil to start, but to consider in the long term. So as I said, Mexico is the second largest marketplace in Latin America. 57% of e-commerce buyers in in Mexico are already purchasing products from the US because they can't get them here in Mexico, which I said before, they're paying higher fees for. 20%, 18% year over year growth in 2022. In 2021, I think it was 27% year over year growth. So we're seeing pretty rapid growth of e-commerce in Mexico in general. And the expected compound annual growth rate for the next 5 years is about 16.8%, which is significant growth by 2027. Worldwide, e-commerce as a share of retail sales, Mexico and Brazil are just outside top 10. So and if you notice, they're not that far behind the US. US is 16.1% of all retail sales happening online. Mexico's 11.3 and Brazil's 10.7. So that's also a good point that's showing like a lot of people are purchasing online here and they're more accustomed to it. I think that's going to continue to increase as well as the amount of product availability continues to increase in Mexico specifically. With Brazil, it's the biggest. I've already said that. It's the second fastest. It was the second fastest growing marketplace in 2021. There's already 130 million e-commerce shoppers, which is roughly 1/3 of the US, which means there's a massive market there. They also have a high expected compounded annual growth rate. So it's another really good reason to get into that marketplace. This was 2022. Brazil at 22.2% was number 4 worldwide. You also see Mexico here at 18% was number 9, growing faster than the US. Both countries growing faster than the US, I should say. And finally, this is another good point for brands on why they should consider getting into Brazil. And the same preference exists in Mexico. Consumers prefer foreign goods. They want to buy stuff from other countries because they consider their own manufacturing and products produced in their own country to be inferior to foreign products. So because of that, customers have a lot of demand for foreign products. And in Brazil, I'm not going to go too far into this. The import taxes to bring a product in from another country, if it's over $50, can be anywhere from 60 to 96% of the cost of goods. So consumers are willing to pay significantly more money to get products that they don't have access to. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of brands don't consider or a lot of brands consider that Latin America doesn't have the money to spend on goods. But if you're a foreign brand and they want your good, they will pay for it and they will spend a good amount of money on it. So I believe, that was all the data points I had.
I wonder if that's part of the business challenge that there's basically high tariff taxes. Is that right? On importers?
That's exactly what it is. I mean, opening a business in Brazil, you're looking anywhere from 12 to 18 months. Dealing with taxes are insane, even at the local level. If you're a local manufacturer in Brazil, you're looking at about 60% taxes on the production costs of your goods. So, which is another reason why foreign brands are able to compete. because customers are still paying high taxes on goods that are produced in Brazil. So yeah, in general, Brazil is kind of a nightmare. It is a big market. There's a lot of sales happening, but dealing with a lot of that red tape makes it not worth it for most brands.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox. It might be just huge growing population, so it's a big market, but ease of business sounds like quite low on that. When you're working with clients, then are you guys selling into Mexico and selling into Brazil, or usually focus on Mexico?
We primarily focus on Mexico. So the way that we always position Latin America to most brands is start on Mexico. That's for a variety of reasons. Logistical, it's the easiest to get products in. You just truck them over from the US if you already have inventory in the US. Or if you're bringing it from China, there's a lot of big ports on the Pacific coast that can receive goods. And just the ease of business is much easier. That's usually the marketplace we focus on. After Mexico, we generally recommend Colombia because Colombia is much easier to do business in. It's the third largest marketplace in Latin America. It's going to be a lot less headaches for you before you really go and tackle Brazil. Brazil has a whole, and Colombia has logistical challenges as well because of the country's geography and topography. Brazil has even more challenges. Brazil doesn't have railroads. Brazil doesn't have highway infrastructure, or doesn't have nationwide highway infrastructure, I should say. So most of the long haul shipping in Brazil is actually boats. So if you're bringing goods from one state in the south to another state in the north, it's going by boat. It's not going by plane. It's not going by car. It's not going by truck. It has to be put in containers, loaded on boats, shipped somewhere else, unloaded. So you're looking at longer shipping times, longer delivery times on a lot of goods. That's another reason why doing business in Brazil is incredibly difficult right now. It's just dealing with a lot of the logistical challenges once your products are actually there.
Yeah, sounds like their large economy could be much larger if they solve some of these problems. It's sort of interesting.
They will, and it'll come. It
Mhm.
just takes time. And they have the money, they have the people
The people.
interested, and it's just going to take time for some really good entrepreneurs to get in there and start figuring out how to do a lot of this stuff.
All right. That's good optimism. We've had a few guests on this show talk about selling in Europe, and they
Mhm.
talk about kind of the localization or the internationalization that needs to happen before you're really ready to do that. What does that look like if someone's listening to this or watching this, they sell in the US, they're doing well on Amazon, they're interested in selling in Mexico? Kind of what do you see as the first steps? Does everything need to be translated? Do we need new photography and design? Kind of what does that process look like, and what do people need to consider if they want to sell in Mexico?
So interestingly enough, I brought this up in the presentation about how consumers want to buy foreign goods.
Hmm.
What we usually recommend from an SEO standpoint is to localize. So in Mexico, I would put all the copy on your product listing pages or your product detail pages into localized Mexican Spanish because
Yep.
every Spanish and each Latin
Mhm.
American country is different. But the images I would actually leave in English because that shows to a lot of the consumers that are finding your product that this is a foreign brand that's here in Mexico. So it actually becomes a little bit more appealing. Obviously, having your images be appealing in general from the graphic standpoint is important, but showing that your product is foreign made or a foreign good is actually going to become more attractive. So there's not much localization that needs to be done. It's really more around copy and advertising. Right?
All right. Pretty interesting. I'm sure there's much more to say. We may have to have you on again here, Mike. Talk to us about who's a good fit to reach out to you guys and how can they find you?
I think so. We also work pretty closely with Mercado Libre. And one of the insights that we get from them is like what categories are the most in demand in Latin America? They are consumer electronic goods, health and beauty products, cosmetic products. All of these are great ways for you to be able to, if you're in those categories, like these are what everyone in Latin America wants. So please feel free to reach out. The best way to get in contact with me is either through my website, amzadvisors.com, or directly at my email, mike@amzadvisors.com.
All right. Appreciate it. Well, Mike Begg, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what's working in e-commerce.
Thank you for having me, Eagan. I hope I was able to provide some insight.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.